Hey YouTube, Warbles on a lot here on the 22nd of April. So it's about 3 months since I drove down to the front gate on January the 26th, aka Invasion Day, or as some people like to post-colonially, neo-imperially describe it, Australia Day, where I made a video titled Invasion Day Killing the Food Plants, referring more or less specifically to the wild, quote, feral, unquote, apple trees, some of which were growing from apple cores that I personally threw here. They were living happily in the road reserve, and I'd been watching them in leaf and in fruit and getting ready for the harvest, that somebody had been paid to kill all the wild feral food plants growing in the public road reserve, like here on Yarraford Road. And I was annoyed by that, so I asked questions at the town hall, and they took my query and they organised for somebody to ring me up, and we had a conversation. And therefore I wrote to Adam Marshall, and thus and because Adam Marshall sent me a note in response to my letter, which I actually YouTube videoed the typewritering of, and I think it was dated the 15th of February. Adam Marshall's first response was the 1st of March, and then later on I got a second, more detailed response dated the 31st of March. Hillbillies will be hillbillies. Okay, right. So, here's the state of play. I've spared you all the boring bits because I've already written the letter in reply, you see. In reply to this, saying basically that he was going to get onto it. And this, on different letterhead, write further to my letter of 1 March, my representations on your behalf, New England Weeds Authority General Manager Mr. Wayne Deere, regarding your objection to the spraying of non-native fruit trees in the Glen Innes 7 Shire. I have now received the enclosed response, and it contains his advice on the matter. Once again, thank you for bringing this matter to my attention, and if I can offer any further assistance on this or any other matter, please do not hesitate to contact me. Yours sincerely, Adam Marshall. Thanks, Adam. New England Weeds Authority, which is actually the New England Tableland's Noxious Plants County Council, trading as the New England Weeds Authority. Let's just pretend to have more authority than we actually have. Mr. Adam Marshall's, dear Mr. Marshall, thank you for your correspondence 1st March in regard to your letter you received from Mr. Chris Wharton regarding his objection to the spraying of non-native fruit trees in the Glen Innes 7 Council area, amongst other spurious claims and accusations. In response, I advise more or less blah 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 blah. By way of further information, in 2004, the authority also ran an environmental weeds project in the then Northern Rivers Catchment Management Authority areas that treated these feral species east of the Great Dividing Range. Community engagement and control programs were undertaken from the Queensland border to Walker Council's southern boundary. Please refer to the enclosed Native Solutions booklet that was printed as part of the project and is still widely distributed in the region, which would be that. Funded by the Northern Rivers Catchment Management, New England Tablelands Noxious Plants County Council, trading as New England Weeds, quote, bracket, pretend authority. A project supported by all the best shiny bums. In reference to the above-mentioned conversation between Mr. Browning and Mr. Wharton, the authority does not express an opinion on fruit fly hypotheses, world takeovers by other countries, nor whether the claim that cleanliness has only enough food for 3 days on their supermarket shelves. Whilst Mr. Wharton is entitled to have an opinion on various matters, the authority's primary function is compliance with legislation under which it has jurisdiction, including weed control, and to support our constituent council requirements, a role we take responsibly and seriously. Wayne Bambi Deer, General Manager. Backing up Mr. Browning, 50 caliber, bap, 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 bang, in the headlights, deer. And also they show a road map, particularly noting that my place, where I'm complaining about their activity, is a high conservation value area. Okay. So this is what I've said in reply to Adam Marshall, MP, Member of Parliament for the Northern Tablelands of New South Wales. It only took 2.5 Cooper's stubbies to type this before setting off on my barefoot Chautauqua across private property, not on public roads. So anyway, herewith what the typewriter did say. Dear Adam, thank you for your note in reply dated 1 March concerning my letter of 15 February, which you answered in greater detail on 31 March 2017. The letter which you received from Mr. Wayne Deer of the New England Weeds Authority was indeed interesting, as was his account of the telephone conversation between his minion, Mr. James Browning, and myself. You will recall that in my initial letter to yourself, I recounted both my, quote, fruit fly hypothesis, unquote, to account for public funds being squandered on the killing of wild fruit trees growing on public land in council road reserves, bracket, i.e. that somewhere there were orchardists who, plagued by pesticide-resistant Drosophila, had deluded themselves that wild trees which had never been sprayed were acting as sanctuaries where fruit flies were retreating and therein breeding up their resistance to the latest sprays. And therefore the aforesaid orchardists had convinced the state and federal governments to waste money conducting pointless magic tree sacrifice rituals up and down every road and laneway across the land, because, in point of fact, fruit flies which are not subjected to continual spraying rapidly lose whatever pesticide resistance their ancestors may have acquired by surviving previous applications. Evolution 101. And I told of how Mr. Browning had categorically denied that his, quote, work, unquote, of killing wild apple trees had anything at all whatsoever to do with fruit flies. I note that on the second page of his letter to you, Mr. Deer has stated to you in writing over his signature the spurious and demonstrably untrue allegation that the authority does not express an opinion on fruit fly hypotheses. Sick. Because you can have an hypothesis, you have many hypotheses. You can't have hypotheses. Dim damn dumb prick. On the same page, dear Mr. Deer, Sir Bambi, suggested that you, Mr. Marshall, should, quote, please refer to the enclosed Native Solutions booklet, unquote, a publication produced for New England Tablelands Noxious Plants County Council, trading as New England Weeds Authority. Apparently, neither Mr. Browning, Mr. Deer, nor yourself actually took the time to consult the document in question, though, because on page 13, wherein it describes fruit trees as emerging weeds, the pamphlet asserts, unfortunately, fruit trees attract pests such as fruit fly, which can interfere with commercial production. Unfortunately, fruit trees attract pests such as fruit fly, which can interfere with commercial production, among other spurious claims. Also, the fruits are consumed by introduced feral animals who kill or outcompete native wildlife. I've never seen a rabbit in an apple tree. I've never seen a fox in an apple tree. I've never seen a goat climb an apple tree to eat the feral apples. This much is demonstrably bullshit. My point is, young Adam, in feeding you the same bullshit which Browning attempted to baffle me with, your dear Mr. Deer has treated you as if you're as silly as he looks, by lying to you in the expectation that you'll never notice the difference. Ironically, before asserting the canard, bracket, French word for duck, which has such a long neck that it seems to have its wings at the back when flying, i.e., it appears to be flying, quote, backwards, unquote. Therefore, canard means an aeroplane with a small wing at the front, or it means any statement which is diametrically backwards from reality, close back bracket. Regarding wild fruit trees constituting a bracket perceived, close bracket, quote, threat, unquote, to commercial fruit production, the brochure specifically admitted that, quote, wild fruit trees, especially apples, have established themselves across much of the tablelands. This is not viewed as a problem by most people who don't mind helping themselves to a free piece of fruit every once in a while. Wild fruit trees, especially apples, have established themselves along roadsides across much of the tablelands. This is not viewed as a problem for most people who don't mind helping themselves to a free piece of fruit every once in a while. Strength in numbers. Democracy. Therein, the brochure admits to pretty much everything I said to you in my first letter on this topic regarding the history, traditions, and cultural Australianness of cherishing all the fruit trees growing in the road reserve in the northern tablelands, because feral food plants growing on public land are regarded by the vast majority of the electorate to be a resource rather than any kind of, quote, emerging weeds which, quote, need to be, quote, treated by a bunch of otherwise unskilled labourers, unemployable unskilled labourers, seeking to be paid to poison the landscape at taxpayers' and ratepayers' expense, who are endeavouring to, quote, grow the franchise, unquote, by continually expanding the list of European plants they may be paid to exterminate, on the hypothesis that, quote, all European plants are pestilential species unless growing on private land. Again, ironically, both Mr. Browning, is he any relation to the famous manufacturer of deer hunting firearms? And your dear Mr. Bambi Deer seem to have, figuratively speaking, quote, shot themselves in the head because the feet were too hard to be sure of hitting, unquote. In my opinion, as a point of honour, I reckon that either you decide to stand up to this pair of pusillanimous, penny-ante, pretentious pissants and actually do something effective to protect the fruit trees in the public road reserves, or you can risk going down in YouTube history as one of the least effective elected representatives since Richard Torbay pretended to be an independent. Justifiably saying, thank you for your attention. I await hearing of your response, telling how you've redressed the currently deplorable status quo ante. Yours faithfully. There we go. And of course, sad to say, for the particular fruit trees here on Yarraford Road, the ones I've been watching for 26 years or so, it's too late. Dear bloody Bambi Mr. Deer and Mr. Browning, between them, have been paid to go out there and kill wild food plants, human food plants, living on public land in the road reserve. And I think they're scumbags. And I've managed to coax them into lying on paper, in writing, over their signature to the politician that they report to. The politician they report to is my personal elected member of parliament, so I require him to kick them up the arsehole till their nose bleeds, drum them out of the service, prosecute them for dishonesty within the chain of command, take away their pension rights, and put them back on the unemployment queue. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. The saga continues. Ciao.